Chapter 8. Arterous, I could tell there was a lady in some physical distress of some kind, and perhaps livestock also not being tended nearby. I really think we should check on it, I said, as I turned my horse into the stand of wood and off our current path. On these matters, sir, I trust you. Right behind you. He followed. Can you call the owls? I will try to focus on anything else I can determine as we get closer. We may need to send word about what we find as soon as we can. Of course. He whistled several times and then remained quiet, waiting for them to catch up. We went along a single path, made presumably from foot traffic, as I didn't discern any hoof prints or cart ruts. The dry grass was beaten down, which was clearly visible. The path wound through the sage and brush up against the tree line, and continued into it, with unbroken leaves and pine needles already fallen on the path from the summer heat. That may have been indication that nobody had been down this path in a few days. After a few hundred yards, the trees changed to small ash, elm, some birches, and even a few small water oaks. Off to the left, the ground was better watered, perhaps by a small spring in a layer of rock on higher ground. I knew that to the north of this stand of trees was higher ground, and though I hadn't been in here before, somewhere close was likely a sharp rise to a low bluff. It was perhaps 15 to 20 minutes of winding our way up, and I could see the rise beneath the canopy of the trees. Then the white, chalky rock outlines from ground level up into the height of the branches. I followed my nose off to the right a bit, and the bluff did indeed come into full view, making a semicircle shape in front of us, maybe 200 feet in width. As we walked into a small clearing, my senses detected a trickle of running water on the left. In the clearing was a dugout on the left inside the semicircle, with a sawed block front, and a couple of chickens walking around. On the right side and slightly downhill from the dugout was a pig pen alongside a small shed with a corn crib on its far right end, which was empty. Two scrawny, filthy pigs in the pen, the ground of which was surprisingly muddy, but also caked in waste. The stench of the sickly woman was coming from inside the dugout. "Anyone home? Hello? Two men are coming in. We don't mean anyone trouble. Hello!" I yelled. Best to announce yourself as a stranger to a small place with only one lady present, I knew. No response. I looked around again and listened intently. I couldn't determine anything from the ambient odors either. With no breeze outside, the air was dead still here. Arterous, would you mind taking the horses off to the left to check if there's a little spring somewhere for the horses to get a drink? Yes, just be careful, he replied. I climbed down and took my pistol out, handing him the reins. I walked slowly to the opening of the dugout and used my pistol's barrel to push away the old wool blanket they were using as a door so I could look inside. I didn't see any windows or other openings. At the back left-hand side of this little space was a double-wide bed, with what looked like the lady I had detected. She was clothed, had a burlap apron, and was propped up against the chalk rock wall, with one leg on the bed and the other hanging off, touching the floor. Ma'am? I asked, knowing already that what I was looking at was a deceased lady. There's something about the way a corpse rests that is always a bit unnatural, and it was here for certain. I looked around, and there wasn't anything out of the ordinary. A small table and a couple of chairs, a small cabinet, a tiny wood stove, more of a box, really, with a chimney pipe that was all crooked and had leaks at the joints. A lantern sat on the table, and a small pile of enameled dishes sat uncleaned in a large iron pot on top of the stove. Not a single thing of value, really, a robber might want. I went to the lady, who was holding a fly swatter in her hand, under a fold of the apron. I went to examine the fly swatter handle because it was as black as tar, which may be due to its continued use, as grease and sweat ground against the wood. but I was drawn to check it. I lifted the single fold of the apron, and her hand was black as well, with tiny strands of it reaching up the wrist, almost as if it had been burned, like the spots of a hen turned on a spit. It was similar to the marks my father had, but less viscous, maybe. I took the fly swatter and walked back outside. I went to the pig pen and looked in. The pigs were sort of, well, dancing almost, as if it was hurting them to stand on the ground in certain places. Since there was no one to feed them now, and no food for me to give them, they had no reason to stay here at all. I opened the gate, found a piece of a tree branch 3 or so feet long, and swatted their behinds until they ran out of the gate and into the woods. They'd be fine out there. This freshwater runoff from around here somewhere will keep them healthy and happy with acorns to fill their stomachs nicely. I went over to where Arterous was with the horses and told him what I found. "Here, take a look at this with your monocle," I said, handing him the fly swatter. "The lady inside is deceased. I am going to try and block off that doorway and close her inside so the pigs and coyotes don't abuse her until we can return this evening and bury her properly." "I left the monocle with your mother, in case she had an opportunity to examine those gates from the prison or anything else she wanted to have a better look at," he said, sticking the fly swatter into his saddlebag. "All right. I'll close it up. We can handle this on the way home." So I went and found a bench to cover the doorway, and stacked a few heavy chunks of the white rock and a wheelbarrow to try and keep varmints out for a few more hours. We were in and out in less than 30 minutes, back on the road to the mission with no further incidents. The route from there to the mission became more well-worn by cart and foot traffic as we approached the flat, open location where the mission was situated. There were a few trees around the outside, especially on the western side of the wall. Those few pines were tall and probably allowed to grow to block the afternoon sun from entering the compound. It had an 8-foot-high brick wall covered in adobe mud, but most of it had worn off over time and weather, exposing brick and the straw used to make them. We viewed the top of the old sanctuary, and it looked the same as I remembered. There was a bell in the wooden frame tower, and I could see the odd timber sticking up along the walls, likely from small buildings or lean-tos built against the interior wall that circled the whole perimeter. The main entrance facing us was an arched doorway 10 feet tall, with the post oak framing a foot square holding the double doors. The doors were in poor shape, very old and worn, originally a 2-inch thick plank, but now splayed and cracked, held together with flat iron bars. We stopped at the hitching post to the right of the doors, checking to see if the water trough had any water in it. There was only a few inches of water, and it was relatively clean, so we tied up the horses and went to the front door. McCourt and Cat came and lit on the wall in front of the horses, then jumped down into the trough and also got a drink. "Why are the doors closed in the middle of the day, I wonder?" Arterous asked. "I'm not sure. Perhaps not a good sign," I confirmed. We both drew our pistols in anticipation of trouble. Arterous went to the left side of the double doors, and I stayed on the right side. A round iron bar extended from the doorframe out about shoulder height, with a rope hanging from it, tied off with a knot at the end. I looked, and it was pinned to the wall. On the inside, at the end of the bar, was a small bell. I peered through the poorly maintained wood slats of the door and tried to see anything I could. There was nothing, and no one. I reached for the rope and rang the bell, keeping my eye between the boards, watching to see if anyone was stirring. Waiting a polite amount of time, I gave it another, longer ring. I also couldn't smell anyone, but the lack of wind wasn't helping. The only breeze was blowing from us into the compound. Now I heard some shuffling which seemed to be coming from behind the chapel's left side. I spotted small animal sheds, hay storage areas, and a couple of small garden plots scattered around the courtyard. The tomatoes and jalapenos, as well as the okra and beans, were also dry and yellow, likely too far gone to bring back now. Puffs of dust began drifting from the back of the chapel now, and a priest appeared, shuffling slowly towards the gate. He had dark brown hair, unkempt, had dust on his black robes, and was shielding his eyes from the bright sun. He approached the gate, placed one hand on the horizontal bar latch, the other still blocking the sun. How can I help you, men? He asked. Father Callious? I asked. Yes. I am Raileanu Tellafrog. This is Arterous. May we come in? He lowered his head, thinking for a moment. Tella. Oh, John's son. Yes, please. He fumbled weakly with the latch, trying to unbolt the door, finally succeeding, holding the door open for us and closing and latching it again behind us. Please, follow me inside out of the sun, he said, and went into the chapel with the same strange gait he had come to the gate with. We entered the chapel, which I remembered had a few windows and stained glass, but all were gone. The frame still clung to shards of glass, some of which lay broken on the ground, both outside and inside. Dust and leaves had blown in and lay everywhere inside. That was strange. I know that none of the children who live around here ever wore shoes. No one would leave all the broken plate glass lying around. The priest went in and sat down in about 2 rows of pews, slumped over. We both stood at the back of the room, near the entrance. Please, I apologize for not visiting your parents in the last couple of weeks. He appeared quite out of breath, and he was beginning to appear weaker and weaker. He wasn't much older than I was, and all the priests in these missions are always sturdy, hard-working, self-sufficient men. Father, where is everybody? Why are the gates locked in the middle of the day? Father Callious seemed to fall asleep as I finished asking. Being midday, the direct sunlight was overhead, none coming in the windows, and it was quite dark inside. My eyes might not adjust for a few more minutes, but he was acting like he had some physical problems. He just shook his head. No. Is there something I can do for you? His eyes were still closed. Father, we came to check on you and see if everything was all right. My father was very ill and has just passed away. Mother mentioned you had not visited in a couple of weeks, so we wanted to see if you were as sick as well. I walked over to him, knelt beside him, trying to look at his face. He had dark, bruised patches that were swollen, and one eye was swollen almost shut, with black discoloration surrounding it. He wasn't falling asleep. He was having trouble keeping his eyes open from swelling. We also came across a lady about halfway here in some woods. She, too, had passed on. Oh, my God! Oh, my God! I have failed everyone! He began wailing, crying uncontrollably, rocking back and forth, his puffy, bruised hands alternating between his face and his knees. I looked at Arterous, stood, and put my hand on Father Callius's shoulder. He kept rocking and crying aloud, now in Spanish. While I waited for him to calm himself, I looked around the room more closely. Several of the front pews were broken and knocked over. The doors on the confessional were ripped off the hinges with splinters still hanging on. Something had obviously happened here. Please, gentlemen, I must lie down. Please. Can you help me to my quarters behind the chapel? He stood feebly, grasping my arm and walking down the center aisle towards the door to the front left of the pulpit. As soon as we stepped outside the door near the back of the chapel, I caught the scent of dead people. Buried, but the outgassing of dead bodies was distinct. We made our way out of the doorway, then to the right, and around to the small structure attached to the back of the chapel. We took him inside and sat him on the small bed. I am so sorry I couldn't be there for your parents, Raileanu. I am so sorry. Your father was one of my best friends, he managed to say, while wiping tears and such with a handkerchief from his nightstand. Father, where are the other priests? Why are the gates closed? What happened here? I tried again. He sniffled a couple of times, clearing his face again and again, trying to muster the courage to tell me. Arterous and I found some chairs and sat down to wait for him to compose himself. Whatever it was severe. This land was unforgiving. It would be so hot that even ants would seek shade in the heat of August. Every few winters, crippling ice storms would coat everything in ice like a layer of glass. The weight of the ice disfigures every tree it touches. Sometimes, even wells whose surface was 30 feet below grade would freeze a foot thick in winters. The Apache, the Comanche, the Mexican army's defeat, bandits, dust storms, crop failure, all that makes for hard folk. And something has clearly broken this man. Bandits came a couple of weeks ago. They were renegade Mexican soldiers. They demanded we give them everything we had. We did. They left for a day but returned, having found cases of alcohol on a wagon somewhere. All of them were drunk and furious. Father Callious was weeping, suffering through the ragged stuttering that happens when you try to take a deep breath during a hard cry. They tried to blame us for having lost the war, saying we took the side of the Texians and helped them. We told them we help every one of God's children, and Jesus said to respect the government, whoever that may be. I said that to them. I did this. It's all my fault. He fell across the bed with unbearable physical and emotional pain, moaning. I tried to help, but just saying that enraged them. They tore apart the church. They threw a dead dog into our well. They beat all of us with boards. Then their leader decided the best way to punish me was to kill all the other priests. All 4! He pushed his face deep into the pillow, screaming. The pressure in his face from the beating, the crying, and the screaming was hard to look at. After a few minutes of deep breathing, his attitude changed somewhat, from sorrow and pain to anger. He sat back up, distorted face now wanting to say more. He cut their throats and made me watch while I was tied to a tree right outside. He pointed vaguely out the little window in his room. They all died because of me. Even Digger and Mary Loggins now also. That's who you came across, I am sure, on your way here. Oh. You mean the lady we found in the woods in the dugout? Was there a man also? We didn't find him. Maybe he... I tried to ask. No, I'm sure they're both dead. I did that. Oh, no, he cried. Digger came here 10 days ago. He told me the bandits had been at his house and stole his money and most of his pigs, and tied his wife up on a bench outside and tied Digger in the pig pen. They made him watch them all violate her. I tried to counsel him, but the horror... I don't know how either survived. Father Callious was in pain, from the stretched skin in places all over his body, cracked and broken bones, and through the misshapen face his eyes showed resolute anger. The soldados were drunk and left most of them tied up, probably thinking they'd die. Digger got free and freed his wife and came here demanding I send for help to catch these monsters. His lower lip was quivering uncontrollably between sentences. I did send word with a local Overn boy. They caught him, and finding the message, they came back with rage and did all this. Beaten, and I'm sure my right hand is broken. Several ribs, and a couple of bones in my left foot. Took me 3 days to bury my brother priests here. When I went outside the walls on the front of our mission, I found the orphan boy messenger tied to the big pine, dead also. Then I had one more grave to dig. And now I learn your father has also died. Oh, I am so low, so low. He adjusted on the bed in a somewhat normal posture, breathing deeply as he cried, and still shuddering from the images we all create in our minds, retelling terrible events. Oh, Father, I am so sorry. That was about the most terrible series of events I had ever heard. He covered his face with his hands, and one was indeed quite swollen compared to the other, seeing them close together now. Is there anything we can do to help? I don't know. There's no mission here. Nothing but me. And I caused all of this, he moaned. Father, that is not true. You gave to those in need. You spoke the truth, as God commands us all to do. We are never responsible for the actions of evil men, regardless of our proximity to them. He allows free will, and these evils are ones these men must contend with God over, not you. I went and knelt in front of him. I wanted him to understand I meant what I was saying to him. Your brothers in service, the young boy, all are with him now, and you know that. I find no fault in what you have done here. The only other courses of action you imagine would not have swayed men in such a state of mind any other way. Surely you know this. Please, our God is forgiveness, and this land needs their priest. Isn't there a mission east of here that we can contact to promptly send you aid and help? I attempted to comfort him with things that are hard to grasp through pain and broken bones. He thought for a minute, lowered his hands from his face, and said, Yes. In fact, you might send an owl. There is a priest who can take confession from magical people. He arrived from Portugal last year. His name is, Lorenzo. I would let you use a pigeon, but they killed all of ours after they found the boy carrying my message about them. That is a large mission, 15 miles due east. He can receive your owl. He will understand. His breathing had calmed a bit. His tears had slowed. He wanted to come out from behind his grief, but the reflections of what he had lived through were still clouding his view of the world. All right. I will write to him now. I'll get you some water. Mama made you some bread, too. You rest and eat when you can. We will do what we can around here and help, but I don't want Mama to be left all alone at night, so we won't stay too long, I told him. We stepped outside, and I asked Arterous to give the bread from Mama to him, and if he was certain no one was looking, to use his wand to clean the dog carcass out of the well and make sure it was drinkable again. He agreed and set off to attend to those things. From outside the door I asked loud enough for the priest to hear, Do you have some paper, pen, and ink? Yes, the door to your right on the back of the chapel building. It goes to the basement where the scriptorium is, where we do our writing. You will find some on the big desk, he explained. All right, I'll be right back, I said, and I found the door and went downstairs. It was indeed right below the floor of the sanctuary. The big wood beams on this room's ceiling were the floor framing for the area above. The wall to the left was lined with a desktop covered in writing materials, and a small wooden rack, extending from that surface to the ceiling, held manuscripts and rolls of paper. Directly across from the stairway were floor-to-ceiling wardrobe-like cabinets that ran along the right side wall as well. They were not all the same. Some were old, some were new, and they had different styles. Likely gifts from locals over the decades, or maybe new parish leaders had ones they brought with them. They fit fairly tightly against each other, except that the last one on the right side was slightly too wide and sat at a slight diagonal, which was probably the best way it could fit. I am guilty of making things that don't fit from time to time, so judgment withheld with a smile. I found the necessary writing materials and wrote a brief letter explaining the events as politely as possible, emphasizing that Father Callious needed help as soon as they could manage. I addressed it to Father Lorenzo and went back upstairs to call McCourt. Arterous was coming back in the front gate, and brought all the canteens as well with him. I called my owl, wound the message tight to the leg, tied it with a burlap string, and sent him off. He wouldn't make it back until nightfall from that far away. "Here, you take this to the father. I'll start on the well if that's all right." Arterous handed me everything. I nodded, and we went to our tasks. Father, do you have any jugs I can put this clean water in for you? I have also sent a message out to Father Lorenzo. He will have it tonight." I sat down in the chair and unwrapped the cheesecloth from the sourdough loaf, breaking off a piece and handing it to him. "I do, in the shed by the well." He ate from the handful of bread and took a big drink of the canteen water. "A family came for Mass the day after I finished burying everyone. They saw what had happened and returned the next day with a full barrel of water. It's all I've had." "None of us are meant to live this life alone, Father. We will return and assist in getting your mission back up and running. Don't try to do too much. Rest and heal up. I bet there will be help from Father Lorenzo's parish in a week or two." The bread and as much water as he wanted were well received. He must have been rationing the water he had, and he was eating one bite of bread and a long drink of water as fast as his sore face would allow. "Also, you should know that those bandits were seen arrested and being escorted by Texian Rangers a couple of days ago. They aren't going to be causing any more trouble." I stayed with him for about 15 minutes, just in quiet company. When he had eaten half of the large round of sourdough, he gently let his body relax onto the bed. "Thank you for the food, Raileanu. God is good." Smiling, I stood up and went outside with Arterous. He had finished clearing the filth out of the well and had also filled the barrel again with new water. He was near a mimosa tree at the front of the compound, squatting down and looking at the ground around its base. "You all done?" I hollered. "Yes, are we ready to leave now?" he asked, standing still, looking at the ground, then walking towards me to the entrance. "He should be okay. I told him about you spotting the bandits having been apprehended and escorted out of the region." "Raileanu!" Father Callious yelled for me. He was standing in the doorway, leaning against it, and seemed to be standing a bit more erect than I had seen him before, even smiling a bit. "Leave the front gate open if you would." Smiling back, I gave him a wave, and we untied the horses and turned to leave, knowing he already felt better none of those troublemakers would be around. We proceeded to the Logginses' place, and I went to remove the barricade I had erected to keep trouble away from her. Arterous went into the flat area west of the indentation where their dugout was located. The water runoff fed the ground, and with the shade of the trees and an abundance of beautiful green ryegrass, it was a peaceful scene. There wasn't any scrubby underbrush or thorn vines, so he began to dig a proper grave for her with his wand. I went inside to wrap her up and try to find anything personal I could place with her to rest. She was quite stiff and foul from the heat, I'm sure. Her passing had left waste on her clothes and bedsheets, so I used them to wrap her and went across the yard to fetch the wheelbarrow. I set her in it gently and went back inside to check for personal items that should be buried with her. Sadly, there was but one folding picture frame of a man and a woman painted in it, but I don't know if it was them, or one of their parents, or even siblings. I couldn't tell. But it was the only thing I found. I set it on her and went to where Arterous had finished his work. "Would you please lower her in?" It would be undignified if I did it. Of course. He directed her up with his wand, and slowly over and down into her grave. He looked all around again and began letting the dirt fill the hole. He had also removed a stack of the white rock from the bluff's edge and stacked it nearby. Wait, Father Callious told me their names. Let me fetch a few bits of wood and make them a proper marker. So I went back to the collection of crates and things near the house, but couldn't find any boards big enough for me to carve legibly on. Well, I thought, those split rails around the pig pen have no further use, so I'll use those. So I forced apart a few pieces and was searching through the junk outside for a saw. I was in front of the dugout's door and turned to look at the corn crib. Maybe it, being roofed to keep the corn dry, had saws and other tools to keep them out of the rain. That's when, in my periphery, I spotted something bright white in the pig pen. It had been mainly under the muck, but when I pulled down one of the fence posts, it must have revealed it. I went straight to it, afraid of what it presumably was. It was the bare top of a human skull. "Arterous, can you come here?" I yelled loudly, and I couldn't take my eyes off it. He calmly walked over and stopped dead in his tracks when it came into view. "Is that—" "Yes, it may be her husband. Can you lift him from the pig pen so we can see if it is?" "Yes, stand back a bit, please." He made a small cross shape and a small circle with his wand, and the body began to rise. It was all in the same place, but not all in one piece. Clothes colored with pig filth clung to what was left of him, and most of the meat rotted and was trampled. The bare top of the skull was the only part exposed. Right away I wondered why I couldn't smell him before now. Far bigger things to consider than this, though, so we took him also slowly, along with the rails I had to the side of the first grave. "Let me do the grave and the markers. I don't want to linger here any longer than needed," Arterous stated firmly. I was about to argue. He set about making the matching hole, lowered the remains of the man in, and I used the wool blanket from the doorway to cover him. Arterous filled it in, placed the stones, and in a hurry had the markers made and placed. Setting another layer of large, heavy stones on top, we finished, washed up in the trickle from the rocks, and got back on the horses. "Remember when the hogs were in the pen? I think that's why they were dancing, or stepping carefully, or whatever I observed earlier. They didn't want to step on him. You may not know this, but even domestic pigs, especially scrawny ones, won't blink twice to find a meal wherever they can. They didn't. They didn't even want to step on him. Also, I couldn't smell him. I only mention it so that when you are able to speak to the professor, you should mention it, and have a good look at the lady's fly swatter when you speak with him." "This is a wild place. It is also vast. I can barely understand how people from European nations would want to come here. In this place are dangers that I cannot fully comprehend," he said. "You honestly don't understand?" I asked. "No, sir, I do not." "This small cove, in that stand of young trees," I pointed back to them, "far from anywhere, was theirs. They shared none of the fruits of their labors with any noble. Every single thing they bought or built, repaired, or reused belonged to no one else. They had asked no one for permission to plant a field, raise pigs, hunt a rabbit or a deer, and no one had a legal right to take it from them. They had a right to the firearms to try and prevent the atrocity that we witnessed. They lived according to their own priorities, guided by what they could do. They would thrive or perish based solely on their ability to generate food and income through free trade and contracts with others, and to use whatever force they deemed fit to protect the fruits of their own hands. Every one of these little homesteads we cross owes allegiance to no one but each other, and the religion of their choice. I must say, for everyone raised in 2,000-year-old cities, whose entire life is ruled by nobles and royals, what Europeans term commoners, the freedom in all arenas here probably seems like a fantasy. But all men and women who know they are in the image of God and refuse to settle for being called common by other humans stained with the same sins are the ones unafraid to come here, I explained. I suppose so. The industriousness and hearty nature I have seen in my short time surprises me, he said, motioning to me for my special flask. After the work we had done here, it was a fantastic idea. It was so hot that a tar-pitched roof might slide off into a pile. So we enjoyed our fill of glacial runoff water, and it was divine. It took another hour, and we were able to make it back to the homestead just as the sun was setting in amongst the trees now, bright orange and scorching less of the land every minute.